Jalen Carter wasn't just another high school senior in the quiet town of Brookstone, Illinois. He was the most disciplined, respectful, and driven student in all of Westlake High. A straight-A student, co-captain of the debate team, and a part-time worker at his uncle's barbershop downtown. His dream? Georgetown University, law school, and one day, making sure kids like him never had to grow up learning how to avoid the cops before learning how to drive. And then there was Josh Peterson, his best friend since third grade. Couldn't have been more different. Blonde hair, football jersey, and a smile that could talk him out of just about anything. He came for money, the kind of money that kept you safe, the kind Jalen had never known. But none of that mattered when they were kids. Back then, they were just two boys trading Pokemon cards and riding bikes down Jackson Street. But high school changes things. Josh started hanging with the football crowd, parties, pranks, trouble. Jalen stayed focused, always the one cleaning up after Josh's mess. Yet somehow, the friendship survived. Because deep down, Jalen still believed in the kid he'd once built pillow forts with. That belief was about to cost him everything. Jalen was organizing flyers for the school fundraiser while waiting on Josh near the student parking lot. He had a shift at the barbershop in 20 minutes. Josh, late as always, came running, breathless, holding a paper bag. Josh, yo, bro, can you hold this for a sec? I think Mr. Daniels saw me near the teacher's lounge. Jalen, half laughing, what did you do now, man? Josh, grinning, nothing serious. Just snuck a few things. You know, snacks. Jalen, you stole. Josh, it's chips and soda, Jay. Come on, help me out, please. If they search my bag again, I'm suspended. You know how Coach is. Jalen looked at him, really looked. He didn't like it. Didn't like the lie he was about to help cover. But loyalty, sometimes it runs deeper than reason. So he took the bag. And 30 seconds later, two security officers walked straight toward him. Jalen stood frozen. Two school security officers, Mr. Hadley and Miss Torres, walked straight toward him with narrowed eyes and radios clipped to their collars. Josh had already backed away, arms crossed, pretending not to be involved. Jalen, still holding the brown paper bag, felt his stomach drop. Mr. Hadley firmly. Jalen Carter, what's in the bag? Jalen looked down. The bag crinkled slightly in his nervous grip. Jalen, just snacks. Chips. Soda. Nothing serious. Miss Torres, we had a report of theft near the staff lounge. Someone matching your description ran off with it. Jalen's heart was pounding. He glanced back at Josh, but Josh wouldn't meet his eyes. In fact, he was already moving further into the crowd, slowly blending into the safety of indifference. Jalen softly, it wasn't me. But it didn't matter. The officers opened the bag. Inside, chips, energy drinks, and two items clearly labeled with faculty lounge stickers, stolen supplies meant for teachers. Jalen's face fell. Mr. Hadley, I'm going to need you to come with us, son. Jalen sat silently across from Principal Hargrave, a middle-aged man who always prided himself on understanding both sides. But this time his tone was cold. Principal Hargrave, Jalen, this isn't like you. But we have witnesses, and this isn't your first time near a scene where things go missing. Jalen blinked in disbelief. Jalen, what do you mean? I've never stolen anything in my life. Principal Hargrave, we've had anonymous notes before. Students saying you're always covering for others, always taking the fall. Jalen looked at the door. Still no Josh. Jalen quietly, I was just holding it. It wasn't mine. Local police station, that same evening. Jalen's mother, Vanessa Carter, a nurse who had just finished a 12-hour shift, sat across from her son in tears. Her hands trembled as she held the citation. Petty theft. Possible school suspension. 1 mark away from college rejection. Vanessa softly, why didn't you say no, Jalen? Why did you take the fall? Jalen didn't know what to say. Not really. Jalen, I didn't want him to get expelled. Josh, he's got football scholarships. He just made a mistake. Vanessa, and you think your future matters less. Jalen lowered his head. He didn't have an answer, But something inside him cracked, the first splinter in a lifetime of swallowing his pride for others. That night, while Josh was at home playing Xbox, Jalen sat in a cold room at the station, waiting to be processed. And still, he hadn't told the truth. Not yet, because part of him still believed Josh would come forward and do the right thing. Jalen's suspension was officially announced the next day. 3 weeks. No classes. No debate team. No scholarship meetings. And just like that, a future he had been building for years collapsed like a house of cards. At school, whispers followed. Eyes that once looked at him with respect now avoided his completely. Teachers who had praised him a week before now glanced at him with suspicion, or worse, disappointment. A few students murmured, "I heard he's been stealing for months. Just never got caught." That's what happens when you hang with people like that. Wasn't he supposed to be some honor kid? And through it all, Josh said nothing. Jalen stared at the acceptance letters on his wall. Georgetown, Howard, UCLA. Each one now felt like a lie. Jalen, to his mom, "They say they're still reviewing my case. I might lose the scholarship." Vanessa, quietly, "We'll get through this. But you have to understand something now, Jalen." She sat beside him, placing her hand gently on his back. "Vanessa, you don't get to make mistakes the way Josh does. Not in this world. Not with that skin. You know that." Jalen nodded. He had always known. But somehow, hearing it out loud, it hurt more. Meanwhile, Josh sat with his teammates, laughing, scrolling through his phone. One of them nudged him. "Man, can't believe your boy took the heat like that. You're lucky, dude." Josh laughed nervously, brushing it off. But inside, guilt was gnawing at him like rust on metal. He knew what he had done. He knew Jalen didn't deserve this. But guilt is funny. It only screams when the world goes quiet. Jalen returned to school, shoulders heavier, smile gone. His locker had been vandalized. "Thief," written in red marker. He wiped it off, said nothing, until one day, Ms. Alvarez, his AP English teacher and one of the only staff members still treating him like himself, pulled him aside. "Ms. Alvarez, you don't have to carry this alone, Jalen. I've seen the security footage. It doesn't show you stealing. Just standing." Jalen looked at her, confused, hopeful. "Ms. Alvarez, if there's more to this story, now would be the time to say something." But Jalen stayed silent, because even now, he still believed that Josh, his best friend, the boy who once promised they'd be brothers forever, would come clean. He believed in loyalty, even if it was killing him. It had been 18 days since the incident. 18 days of whispers. 18 days of isolation. 18 days of Josh saying nothing. Jalen had tried to stay composed, to focus, to pretend like it didn't eat him alive. But the walls were closing in, and even the people who once defended him were beginning to turn. The final straw came during Senior Recognition Assembly, an event Jalen had dreamed of since freshman year. He was supposed to walk across the stage and be honored for leadership, academics, and community service. Instead, he sat in the last row, in a metal chair marked restricted, not even allowed to stand when his name was read. Josh, meanwhile, walked the stage, football jersey on, wide smile, cheered on like a hero. Jalen sat alone, fingers trembling, knuckles white around a pencil. The door creaked open. Josh, casual tone. "Hey man, I saw you at the back. That sucked, huh?" Jalen didn't answer. "Josh, I didn't think it would blow up like this. I mean, it was just snacks, bro. They're really going hard on you." Jalen stood slowly. Jalen, quiet but sharp. "Yeah, they are. And you're just watching." Josh shifted awkwardly. "Josh, I was gonna say something. I swear. I just didn't want to lose my spot on the team. You know how hard my dad's been pushing me." Jalen, voice rising. "You think I don't know pressure? You think my mom hasn't been working double shifts just so I can apply to colleges that now might never even call me back?" Josh looked down. "Josh, I didn't ask you to take the blame." Jalen, cutting in. "You didn't have to. You knew what would happen if I held that bag. You knew what it would look like. But you gave it to me anyway, because you knew the system would believe you and punish me." Josh's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Jalen, final low. "You're not my friend. You're just a coward in a jersey. Jalen walked in. Alone. Shoulders squared. Eyes clear. Jalen firmly. I'm ready to tell you the full story. And this time he did. He told Principal Hargrave everything. From the moment Josh handed him the bag to the moment he was arrested. He gave names, times, and details. No more silence. No more protecting someone who had let him burn just to stay clean. Ms. Alvarez approached Jalen quietly and handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter from school board. The suspension lifted. His record wiped. His scholarship offers reinstated. But the damage, it still lingered. Not in paper trails or academic reports, but in trust. Josh never spoke to him again. And that was fine. Jalen didn't need him to. Because for the first time in weeks, he could finally breathe. Weeks passed. Jalen's story, once buried under shame and silence, had finally been set free. And the ripples it caused were impossible to ignore. A quiet room. A long table. Microphones. Teachers, students, parents, and board members. At the center sat Jalen, not as a suspect, but as a speaker. Jalen, to the room. I didn't come here to ruin someone's future. I came here because mine was almost taken from me. And it wasn't because I made a mistake. It was because someone else could afford to make one, and I couldn't. He took a breath. Jalen, if I hadn't spoken up, I'd still be seen as guilty. Not because I did something wrong, but because I fit the idea of someone who would. Murmurs filled the room. Some people nodded. Others looked stunned. By the end of the meeting, the school district announced a new policy review, starting with how disciplinary actions were investigated. Change had begun. Jalen walked across campus. Alone, but no longer invisible. Some students still avoided him. But others? They stopped him. A girl from sophomore year handed him a note. Thank you for standing up. You help more people than you know. Another student from the robotics team, who had also been unfairly blamed once, simply nodded and said, Respect, man. Real talk. And even Ms. Alvarez, his English teacher, gave him something unexpected. A letter of recommendation. Not just for college, but for the National Youth Leadership Conference. Josh watched from a distance, sitting alone on the bleachers, headphones in, staring at the football field. He still had his scholarship, but something in his expression had changed. He knew what he had lost. Not just Jalen's friendship, but the kind of man he could have become, had he chosen truth. And that loss, it wasn't one that could be undone with touchdowns. Jalen stood at the podium, wearing his deep blue robe, valedictorian sash draped over his shoulders. He looked out at a crowd filled with students, parents, and faculty. His voice was steady. Jalen, addressing the audience. I used to believe silence was loyalty, that protecting someone meant never speaking up. But now I know silence, when it protects injustice, is a form of betrayal. He scanned the crowd, his mom in the front row, eyes full of tears and pride. Jalen smiling. Speak up, even when your voice shakes. Because the truth doesn't just set you free. It gives others permission to rise too. Jalen walks off stage. The camera lingers on his face, not triumphant, but at peace. His journey wasn't easy, but it was real, and that's what gave it power. They tried to define him by a lie, but in the end he rewrote the truth.